I know the fans have been waiting. We finally get a chance to talk to Chael about Chael. So basically, the backstory for you, he was suspended 1 year by the California State Athletic Commission after UFC 117 back in August. The appeal was heard in early December. The suspension reduced to 6 months. So that means Sonnen eligible to return to fight on March 3rd. Ultimately, that suspension was for failing to disclose information about a medical condition that required Sonnen to use testosterone replacement therapy. So obviously some questions as to whether or not you did in fact reveal the condition. I know there are discrepancies there. How exactly does all of that situation happen and go down?
Well, you know, listen, rules are rules and they have to be followed. A government agency, which is the commission, has to be transparent, clear, and decisive. They said that I didn't disclose. I proved 3 different ways that I did. I had an email command. I disclosed it directly to the executive director, and we wrote it down on a form that was signed and dated with the head of the testing agency. We proved all of these things, and we were still told that we didn't disclose. I don't know what dictionary they consult to get a definition of the word disclosure, but the ones that I read at the University of Oregon, that's disclosure. Listen, there's no such thing as a 6-month fine. If somebody broke the rules, they serve 12 months. This isn't like traffic court where you drop the suspension because the guy showed up in a suit and looked nice. I came in, I put my case forward, they dropped it to 6 months. That's the same thing as saying we were wrong.
All right, well, also as part of your defense, you invoked the Nevada State Athletic Commission, specifically that you had disclosed to them in the past that you had been using testosterone replacement therapy. Let's hear from the NSAC Executive Director, Keith Kaiser. He has refuted that claim. Here's what he told ESPN.com's Josh Gross. I know he didn't say anything to me, and if he would have said something to my doctors, they would have told me. Maybe there's some legitimate answers here. I don't want to prejudge anything on this, but I've never talked to the guy in my life, and I've never cleared him for TRT in my life. I'm as confused as anyone. So your thoughts on what Keith Kaiser had to say?
Well, listen, federal law known as HIPAA would prohibit a government official from speaking about my private medical records. Keith Kaiser does a great job. He's a very good guy, and I have no problems in Nevada.
All right, well, this is one of your first public appearances, obviously, since the hearing. So what is the message maybe you'd like to send to your fans as you try to move forward as a fighter and put this behind you?
Well, we get through all the red tape in just a matter of months. The very 1st of March, we'll resume training, and I'm looking to have a fight immediately following. There's 3 shows going on in that month. I'm going to get tabbed on one of them.
All right, well, as for your next opponent, I know there's been a nice back and forth for the fans on Twitter between you and Vanderlei Silva. Is that a possibility? What do you think is going to be the resolution?
Well, you know, listen, I'm not quite feeling up to myself. I'm suspended and can't resume training until early March, so I'm looking for an easy fight. I took an easy target, and I called out the guy with the worst record in the history of the UFC.
All right, well, that's good to hear, and we anxiously await your next fight and your next opponent, and more importantly, I guess for us, good to have you back here on MMA.
I appreciate it. Good to be here.
All right, some other news for you. Later tonight on HDNet, it is the annual year-end Dynamite card for Dream in Japan, fellas. As usual, ton of big names, not the least of which is Alistair Overeem, and here he faces the former UFC heavyweight Todd Duffy. Interesting fight on paper. Obviously a huge discrepancy in terms of the experience. There's some questions as to how healthy Duffy is. You know, accepting the fight on short notice. What do you think?
You know, those are all factors. I'm excited to see what looks like 2 superheroes going at it. I mean, both these guys are built like Greek gods. They're huge, and it's going to be interesting. Hopefully that short notice and hopefully those possible injuries won't affect Duffy's performance, but both these guys are very explosive. I don't see this fight going the distance. I think one of these guys is going to get the finish by knockout.
You know, it's really hard to care about this fight. Anytime Overeem goes out there, you know, it really is perplexing. He doesn't have a whole lot of meaningful fights. My advice is bet your neighbor a bag of potato chips so that you can even care. Don't spend your time clicking the refresh button to see who won this fight. Go out, it's New Year's, watch the ball drop. Tune in next week. We'll tell you who won.
Kenny, though, in terms of Alistair Overeem, and I certainly appreciate your opinion, coming off that resounding win at the K1 World Grand Prix Championships, a lot of people, Chael, Kenny, think he's the best heavyweight striker we have in MMA. Is that too much of a compliment?
Well, a lot of people think that Elvis Presley's still alive as well. I don't know that Overeem is an MMA fighter at all. Duffy got released from the UFC. Overeem got stomped in the 1st round by the UFC light heavyweight champion. I'm really not seeing it.
All right.
I tell you what, for Overeem to go out and compete very well in the K1 tournament, I thought was...
Brings us to the former heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar. According to Yahoo's Dave Meltzer, the WWE is interested in Lesnar for its upcoming WrestleMania. Lesnar still under contract to the UFC, and CEO Lorenzo Fertitta says he's been given no indication that Brock is even interested in a return to pro wrestling. As far as Fertitta is concerned, they are just internet rumors. We welcome you back in, John, Anna, Kenny, Florian, and Chael Sonnen. So, guys, the story is out there. How realistic a possibility is this that Brock would actually return to the WWE?
I don't think it's realistic at all because, I mean, how many times we have to hear Dana White say no, no, no to it? I mean, if Dana's saying no and saying it's not going to happen, I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, Brock Lesnar is still under contract.
Listen, Brock's got an obligation to the UFC, and what somebody needs to explain to Brock is that deals go both ways. You can't just take and not give back. So Brock needs to honor his deal. Look, Vince McMahon may have been willing to forgive you. Dana White will not. On the other hand, if I got stomped out in 3 minutes by a guy I outweighed by 50 pounds, I'd think about quitting too.
No, and I think that's the good point. After what happened against Cain Velasquez in October, I think a lot of people are wondering if Brock maybe was humbled by that and wonders if he can get back to the top of that heavyweight division.
I really like what he said after the fight, and that was that he needs to get right back to the game, get better, and I think he'll do that. I think he needs to do that. I don't think he wants to go out of the sport on that note at all.
Well, we all know, Chael, actions do speak louder than words, and I guess for Brock, we've heard maybe he hasn't even been in the gym since that October loss. Do you think his heart is still in the mixed martial arts game?
I don't know if it is or not. Look, there's not a whole lot of guys that can beat Brock Lesnar. At the same time, there's never going to be a scenario where Brock Lesnar closes the gap that is insurmountable against Cain Velasquez. I think he can be number 2. He could be number 2 for a while, and I don't think he wants to do it, and I think that's okay, too. But if you have an obligation and you made a deal with Zuffa, honor your obligation.
Yeah, it is a good point, though. You wonder if Brock Lesnar wants to hang around to be 2nd, 3rd, or 5th best in that heavyweight division. All right, well, don't forget the poll. All right, one thing left to do, of course, we tap out. Now, we talked about the Dream Dynamite card on our extended version at ESPN.com, so we'll get a prediction now. The heavyweight clash between Alistair Overeem and Todd Duffy. Who do you like?
You know what? I'm going to go with the upset.
Are
Duffy's
you really?
going to get the KO.
Wow.
From the department of who cares, I'm going to predict that Overeem cheats his way to another meaningless victory.
All right, that's good there. All right, UFC 125, we'll get 3 predictions from you. Clay Guida, Takanori Gomi, who emerges at 155?
I think Gomi's going to get the win.
I like Guida.
All right, Gomi's slight underdog there. Next up, the co-main event, Chris Lieben, about a 2-1 favorite against Brian Stann. Who do you think?
I'm going to go with Brian Stann, another underdog. I'm going to go with Stann by a decision.
Brian Stann's very hard to cheer against, but in this one, he's very hard to bet on. I'm going to take Chris Lieben.
All right, no chalk for K-Flow thus far. We'll see if he goes with Gray Maynard in the UFC lightweight title fight against Frankie Edgar.
I am. I'm going to go with the favorite on this one. I think Gray Maynard is going to get another decision win.
Maynard should win. He's bigger. He's won before, but I don't think he pulls it off. Frankie Edgar keeps the title.
All right, that's going to do it from here. We will have highlights from every